This is the Hot Take Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Lucas and John Viveiros.
Hey everyone, it's John here from Hot Take Hockey, joined by Lucas for episode 25 of the Hot Take Hockey Podcast. Make sure if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, make sure thumbs up, rate it high, give a comment down below on the episode or just in general hockey. But Lucas, man, we just come off Super Bowl weekend, so I feel like this is kind of the time where focus full out on the NHL and NBA now, but more specifically the trade deadline for the NHL. The NBA trade deadline passed, so now we're full on the NHL trade deadline. Lucas, man, how was your weekend? How was the Super Bowl? All that stuff.
It was good, man. It was good. Good Super Bowl weekend. Watched a great game, as I'm sure a lot of you did out there. Yeah, great time with family and friends. That NBA trade deadline you just referred to, Johnny, I don't know if we're going to get trades that are that big.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something if we did? But yeah, looking forward to it now. We're, like you said, football's in the rearview mirror. NBA trade deadline has passed us, and it's hockey in full force up until March 3rd, man. Looking forward to seeing some big moves coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah, pretty crazy with like the NBA. I feel like is always busier, but yeah, that's just like dream territory when it comes to the NHL. Like just seeing Kevin Durant and Kyrie just like casually traded mid-season. Imagine just seeing like Crosby dealt. Just a guy with that much. So the NHL level of that right now is like Erik Karlsson and Patrick Kane. We're gonna get into it, but yeah, do we even expect those deals to go down? Like not necessarily. There's so much smoke around it, but to me, I guess there's a shot between one of those big names going. But obviously, the last couple of days, and I got some jerseys related to the conversation at the back and you got the hat on. Chychrun, man. I know last ep or maybe it was the ep before, but I'm so tired of talking about this, man. I feel bad for the guy. Like now it's straight out being told that he's not going to play until the trade happens. And he was held out. And I honestly, Saravelli talked about it. Chris Johnson talked about it. Like, have we ever seen a public statement from a team just going, yeah, this guy's not going to play tonight for trade related reasons, like well ahead the way it was.
Yeah. And multiple games. And he's obviously, like you said, I guess his time with the Coyotes is officially done. He's not going to play another game, right? Until he's dealt. I mean, everybody with the frustration we have that we want him to be dealt so bad, there's nobody that wants this to be over more than him, right?
Yeah, worst kept secret in hockey right now. And worst case for him is this just goes on and he's just sitting. Because the Coyotes have just locked it into the whole league that he's getting dealt. And if the Kings want to be particular about the return now, and even Saravelli today is throwing out the fact that teams are even requesting the Coyotes to retain $1 or $2 million off that. Like it's already an unreal contract and teams are not giving up, I guess, that second first round pick that the Coyotes want unless there's retained salary. So, it's such a weird situation. As I said, like more times than not, we see if a player's held out, it's like precautionary reasons, right? Not trade related reasons. So it keeps up with the storyline of what we've seen the last year. Chychrun's been in trade rumors for so long.
And I feel bad for Brandt Clarke as well, because he was obviously dragged into the trade discussion yesterday, and that's sort of been shut down by Friedman and by other sources. But yesterday, especially on Super Bowl, or obviously we're recording this on Monday, on Super Bowl Sunday, this is blowing up on Twitter. And I just sort of tuned out to it later in the afternoon because I was so focused on the Super Bowl. And I was very confident I was going to check my phone at the halftime show and just see he was dealt to the Kings, and it didn't go through. So it's definitely, as Friedman reported today, like caused some curiosity amongst other teams that were interested in him. And now that they see the door creep back open, they thought it was closed. It's back open. A lot of teams are back in the mix for adding Jakob Chychrun.
Yeah. And Lucas, I want to have this conversation with you because I want to get your thoughts, because I've talked to a bunch of people that whether they are inside the hockey insider universe a little bit or work for hockey organizations. Like last year when it came to the Jack Eichel trade, and this is where I think some insiders come into play in terms of screwing around trade negotiations. And this goes back even to a couple of weeks ago when Elliot Friedman was blamed by fans for basically like releasing information that kind of swayed the talks. And what I was saying with Eichel last year is that the rumor was that multiple insiders were being kind of fed information about the Flames being close to trading for Jack Eichel just so Vegas would give up the assets that they were requesting. So I wonder, like, I'm not saying this was like, I don't want to bash anyone here, but there was a few people yesterday that were talking about Brandt Clarke. I wonder if information was slipped or certain things are slipped just to raise the prices from other people. Cause like Brandt Clarke, that's no like small piece whatsoever. That's like to me, one of the best by far defense prospects in the league right now. And yeah, he got sent down. He's playing for the Colts. But I mean, Lucas, I think I told you this. I just watched Barrie play in Sudbury, and Brandt Clarke, the Colts beat the Wolves 2-1. Brandt Clarke, primary assist on both goals, including the game winner in overtime. Unreal, bro. Unreal to watch. So when I saw that, I made a video about it. I was shocked. And if the Coyotes are getting, to me, just Brandt Clarke in return, I think that's a dub. That's quite a hot take. But what do you think of all that, man? Especially, like I said, with maybe insiders being a part of, I don't know, trade negotiations changing, like teams trying to slip stuff so things change. I don't know.
That's a good link, John. That is a really good link and an interesting like conversation to really bring up, because it's almost like, you know, other teams would want that information to leak out on the LA Kings. To sort of create tension, right, between LA and Arizona in the discussion. And then obviously LA gets frustrated that this information's leaked out and maybe it falls through. And then the third team comes swooping in and grabs them, like what you just said with the Jack Eichel example. So
yeah, it can go in so many different directions.
Yeah, it can. But I mean, it's definitely an interesting topic. And in the world we live in today and how information is just, you know, from one phone call is all of a sudden on Twitter, 5 minutes later, it can be done that quickly. It's interesting when there's so many different contacts that could have inside access to this information, that really leaking it and being that sort of hero that does it is sometimes on people's mind, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think it's maybe a little bit of both. I also think, going back to your conversation at the start, is like maybe the NHL and so many insiders around hockey are just not used to so many big names like this being in talks like at once, like Jacob Chychrun, Timo Meier, Patrick Kane, Tarasenko just got traded. Like, go down the list. There's so many guys that Erik Karlsson, we're going to talk about that. So I wonder if it's that, but what you just said too, it's like, I wonder if some insiders are like getting ahead of themselves a little bit. Like, they just hear one rumble. It's like, oh, I want to get ahead of that and be that guy. And I also think just with the industry too, I mean, hey, this is from a sport media background. It's like so many people are always competing for just that small little edge. So if they get even a piece of information, hey, if they're wrong, sure, might get bashed a bit, but if they're right, they're going to be
the hero.
Yeah, they're the hero. They're getting creds from left and right. Friedman will give them creds. Everyone's going to give them creds. So I don't know. I think there's certain things where they come out and you're just, okay, let's wait for Friedman, or let's wait for one of the top dogs to really say something. But I mean, that's kind of what happens with the trade deadline, but I think more so the NHL trade deadline. A lot of people are on edge right now, and more so this Chychrun situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to say, transition to another star, Mr. Patrick Kane. And obviously the story came out last week after Tarasenko was dealt to the Rangers. Patrick Kane made it known that, you know, that was a destination that he had in mind. And if he was going to leave Chicago, that was the destination that was really appealing to him to move on to. So what is your initial reaction to Patrick Kane's comments? And obviously the Rangers deciding to go into a different direction with Tarasenko?
Yeah, I made a video a little bit talking about it. Like, I don't know. To me, I wonder if the Rangers looked at it, and to me, this is probably what it is. I wonder if the Rangers looked at it and just went, okay, the price point is just, there's too much of a gap here from what we're giving up for Tarasenko and what we're giving up for Patrick Kane. And sure, Patrick Kane would be a great fit with Panarin as a Zibanejad. That'd be the best line in hockey automatically. But hey, I mean, Tarasenko talked about being friends with Panarin, talked about that instant chemistry, and they literally scored off the first goal in that game. I had Tarasenko a goal for that prop bet. So nice. I was like, nice. Hey, maybe should have got a little greedy and went for the first goal at night, but I wasn't expecting that. As much as I thought the chemistry might hit in that game, in the first 5 minutes of the game, Panarin and Tarasenko, you couldn't have written it up better. So, you know what? I think it was a smart move for the Rangers. You know what? Panarin with Patty Kane or Panarin with Tarasenko, I think the chemistry would have hit either way. The only thing I'll say is, like, Patrick Kane in the playoffs is insane, but we also saw Tarasenko in the playoffs going crazy and obviously on the cup run. So I think either way, the Rangers were seeing playoff experience and obviously that chemistry, and then they probably were giving up a lot less for Tarasenko. Yeah,
and Tarasenko is one of those guys too that I think a lot of people around the league may have, you know, looked down on him as an asset this season as the season's gone on, and he doesn't look as, you know, motivated as in years
and going into the deal, he only had 10 goals, right?
Yeah, he only had 10 goals. He's on a down year. And I think a lot of it is, you know, that Blues team is just in such disarray this season that it was very tough to get, you know, for anybody over there right now to get juiced up to play a game. So Tarasenko joining the Rangers, I think, is a sweet fit, man. Like, I think that line is a top 5 line in the league the rest of the way. But yeah, Patrick Kane specifically, I actually admire the guy coming out and saying the comments that he did, because, you know, it's almost like,
you don't get that often.
Yeah, we don't get that often in hockey specifically, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like other sports players are more outspoken with how they feel and how when moves are made. In hockey, it's a little closer to the chest for the players. And I actually appreciate that Patrick Kane came out and said, you know what, that was the spot that kind of caught my eye. And we'll see if there's another spot that emerges that he, you know, shows interest in. We'll see on that one.
Yeah, I think there was conversations about the market and fit, obviously, with Panarin. And that's kind of why it scares me, Lucas, because the Boston Bruins on a lot of these players have just been super sneaky, like the Chychrun conversations, the Patrick Kane conversations. So that makes me a bit nervous. But I do think that when it comes to these big names, especially in a situation like Patrick Kane, who's nearing towards the end of his career somewhat, you want to be selective a bit. You don't want to just get traded Chicago's perspective. They want the biggest package, and I'm sure Patrick Kane will respect some loyalty there, but I mean, he controls his future. So he's not just going to go to a random team. The Rangers were probably at the top of his list, but I would imagine there's a couple other markets he's looking at, including Boston. So I don't know. We'll see if Patrick Kane still has that interest in playing with a top player, because if it's seriously a top center that he's looking at, I'm looking at McDavid and Matthews. But again, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But Lucas, I wanted to throw something at you just because, so everyone listening and watching, we got a big guest. We're bringing on Mark Spector, senior columnist with Sportsnet. You probably know him best through Sportsnet. So Oilers chat and talking about these big names, whether it's a Patrick Kane or we've talked about Chychrun and all these names. Erik Karlsson is a big one right now. But I also want to look at another Canadian team too, and I want to ask Mark about it. So Winnipeg Jets, Edmonton Oilers. I think these are the two teams where probably, unless the Flames can really pick up their act here, if you had to pick one team right now, Lucas, to make a big splash between these two Canadian teams, or at least go far, who are you putting your eggs, like what basket are you putting your eggs in right now? Because I think the Oilers obviously have the star power. I shouldn't say the Jets don't, but the Jets, I think, are just more, I would say, overall balanced.
So in terms of who's more likely to make
well, I was going to say in terms of potential of making moves at the deadline, but just right now, based on potential of moves, potential going into the playoffs, like who am I higher on? Yeah, who are you higher on?
Yeah, I think it's tough. It's actually a really good call. I'd say I'm higher on Edmonton. I'm going to default to Edmonton because of the last few years and the playoff success, semi-success that they've had. And, bringing in Jack Campbell, and Jack Campbell's looking a lot better than he did early on in the season. And this is that sort of hot Jack Campbell that you see in the two sides of him. So I'd say the Oilers. I think that with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, I can't doubt those guys. And the Jets are one of those teams where they've sort of gone back and forth on being a contender, a pretender, out of the playoffs and in the playoffs. So I'm not going to side with Winnipeg on this one. I'm going to go with Edmonton. And I think that a defenseman for them is definitely crucial, as well as, maybe adding a top six forward alongside McDavid and Draisaitl. So I'm going to go with the Oilers. What about you, John?
Yeah. On top of that conversation too, I want to say, to me, I think Winnipeg, I look at Winnipeg as more of a tinkering team going to this deadline. And I honestly want to be wrong, because for every team I talk about this in that way, I want to be wrong because I want to see the big deals happen. But for Winnipeg, whether it's like a Johnny Taves or like a different middle six guy, I feel like that's more their direction, because I think defense, they're pretty established, and obviously in net, they're established. The Oilers, there's so many rumors of that big swing. And I feel like I've talked to so many Oilers fans or people around the Oilers this year, and it's like Tyson Barrie's played his role really well, like on the power play really well. All the guys love him, like obviously on the ice in that situation, but also off the ice. But going back to the Erik Karlsson conversation, I want to talk about that with Mark as well, is like, if Erik Karlsson's coming in, Barry's got to be going out. Like he's gotten, not even just because of the cap hit. And I've talked about the cap hit. I mean, even if Karlsson, there's some retained cap there, you still have to see like Puljujarvi and another major contract going back the other way. And I also look at it as just like Erik Karlsson, his success to me, yeah, sure, it's a confidence thing, but it's also like the fit thing, because Brent Burns goes out. I don't think it's a coincidence that Erik Karlsson explodes when Burns leaves. So I think that's where Erik Karlsson needs to be. He needs to be the number one power play and have no feel like he's the guy, and that's it. Like there's no room for another guy being in that equation. And Barrie would, unfortunately for him, compete. I mean, and
John, isn't Barrie exactly like that though too? Yeah. Because I actually listened to Barry's Chicklets interview a few episodes back for those guys. And he actually said that directly on there, that Toronto was a tough transition for him, because when he got there, he was immediately like, well, Morgan Riley's here. Where am I fitting on the first power play? Like that's always been his role. So they both sort of have that same, outlook on they need to be the guy, especially on PP1, right? So absolutely, you're bang on. If Karlsson's coming in, Barry's got to be the one going out, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people around the Oilers have just felt that Barry won't be moved. Like he's done well. So if they're going for the big swing, and you know what's crazy? Like I'll pull up some sources even as we talk to Mark, but it's like Edmonton was tied to the Oilers, but there's been cold water kind of poured on that. There was talks of Gavrikov, but apparently the extension ahead of time has been difficult to make happen. I know there's been Jake McCabe. I'm pretty sure I would have to correct this source, so don't hold me to it, people in the comments. But I'm pretty sure Jake McCabe has a modified no trade clause, and I think there was a rumor that the Oilers are on it.
Yeah, he does have a modified no trade clause. I know that for sure.
So I think there was a rumor floating that the Oilers are on that. So that's another interesting dynamic. If like the Oilers are limited on defense additions, and like the big players for the Oilers, including McDavid and Draisaitl, just want that big star puck moving guy, I think Karlsson's such an obvious choice, right? Like the most obvious choice.
Absolutely. And I think when you're comparing Edmonton and Winnipeg, I do like the connection you made there too, because there's another layer. And that's that for Edmonton, this is do or die time. Like we're getting there, right? McDavid and Draisaitl have to be given the opportunity with that big swing and that big ad that shows that management and ownership show them that we're going for it. Like we believe in you guys. We're going to get it done. And Winnipeg actually has that same sort of mentality in a different sort of way, because Cheveldayoff's been there forever. Yeah. And this is kind of his version of a last dance in a way, because he's had so many years to get something done. So it's either him. I think it's him that's on the way out next. He's made the coaching change. He's had the same core. So this is on him to make that big splash. So,
well, and if people remember, like this past summer, it was a conversation of, are the Jets going to blow it up? Like all the Dubois drama and all these things happening. And now Morrissey's had like a Norris level year. Shifley's rebounded. Dubois is having a great year. So it's like all these things that obviously Kyle
Hellebuck.
Yeah. So
everybody.
The Jets, it's interesting here because is this like a last run kind of thing before maybe they make another big change or make big changes in the offseason, as you just said, shovel day off and that feeling. So, and to me, you know what, Lucas, I'll say this for people listening. I think if I took a 1-versus-1 right now, who I'm seeing more prepared for a series like 1v1, I'm taking the Jets. But the thing is that we have to consider, the Jets probably have a much tougher path to the conference final than the Oilers do. I look at that Pacific Division, I think it's wide open, and the Golden Knights have fallen off at times. So it's like the Jets have to pass potentially the Avalanche and the Stars.
Yeah.
That's no easy feat. So to me, 1v1, sure, I might be taking Jets for certain reasons. But in terms of the scenario both teams are in, I think, I'm with you. I think the Oilers have the better opportunity. They just got to get into the playoffs. And I honestly will say, if they make that addition for like an EK or something, I'm taking them. I'm taking them for a conference final minimum. Wow. Minimum if they get an addition like that. So we'll see. But Oilers talk, going right into our transition with our guest, Mark Spector from Sportsnet. And we'll chat with him about Oilers, some hockey, and the race to the playoffs. Let's talk with Mark Spector. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Hot Take Hockey podcast. We've got Mark Spector. You probably know him through his work with Sportsnet, senior columnist with Sportsnet, and a lot of his coverage with the Oilers. Mark, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing today?
Pleasure to be here, my friend. How's it going out there?
It's good, man. We're in the Toronto market, but I would say right now, especially with all the defense conversations, the Oilers are hot in the trade rumor conversation. Just for yourself right now, covering how's the season been? How's all the coverage been? And just, hey, the Oilers looking for another playoff run.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, I just got off the phone with Ken Holland a couple hours ago, and
wow.
And everybody wants, in the summertime, everyone wants you to sign your guys, right? Yeah. So last summer, 2 summers ago, it was Zach Hyman, and it was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and everyone wanted those guys signed, and they signed them, and they're both really good deals right now. Both guys are traded for 90 points this year. They're making like 5.1 and 5.5. Then the next summer, the Oilers go 3 rounds, and everyone says, you got to sign Evander Kane. So Ken Holland goes out and he signs Evander Kane. And they say, you got to go sign a goalie. So he goes out and he signs Jack Campbell. And he signs Brett Kulak. And he spends all his money. He's right to the cap. And now the trade deadline comes and everybody says, go get Erik Karlsson at 11.
Yeah.
It's impossible, right? You can't be buying and buying and buying all year long. I sense Ken Holland might just be out of money here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, well, it's always a conversation of you can't make fans happy. You're always looking for more. Fans are always wanting more. But I think it's also just easier for fans to feel that way when you have a guy like Connor McDavid on your team and you have a guy like Leon Draisaitl on your team. I mean, the window becomes small very quickly. So for yourself, just covering the team, how do you feel about the team right now? And we were kind of just talking about it going into our chat, is that Pacific Division's wide open. And while the Oilers have had their struggles, I mean, it's their division that they still want it, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I think the whole West is wide open. I think a year ago, certainly you're right in the Pacific. There's not a team in the Pacific where I go, well, there's no way you're beating them. It's wide open. Edmonton could win it. Vegas could win it. I mean, LA, it sounds like if they do get Chychrun, who knows? Maybe they win it, but it's open.
Yeah.
And I would extend that to the Western Conference. A year ago, we all looked at the Colorado Avalanche and said, man, like, what did Daryl Sutter call it? 8 wasted days playing in the playoffs?
Yeah.
And he was right. The Oilers wasted 8 days in the Western Conference Final, lost 4 straight. They could have won a couple of those games, but they weren't winning that series, and everybody knew it. Right now, today, Colorado's not that team, right? They've got a bunch of injuries. They've had some guys out. They're still really good. Dallas is really good. I like Winnipeg a lot. I'm not saying it's easy, but only one team's coming out of that Central. And at this point, that team isn't what Colorado was a year ago. So, yeah, if you're the Edmonton Oilers, man, it's time. You took a 3-round run last year. You got the 2 highest scoring players in the league for the last 5 years. If not now, when, right? It's time for sure.
Yeah, Mark. And when you got 2 of the top scorers in the league, plus you got all those additions you just said, Zach Hyman on a 90-point pace, Jack Campbell now finding his game and looking really, really, really good the last handful of weeks. Then what is that key piece that, it might not be the sexiest shiny toy that everyone's alluding to with Erik Karlsson, but what is that piece that the Oilers, in your opinion, are going to zero in on as we approach the deadline?
Well, it's a moving target, Lucas, right? It's like a month ago I'd have told you it's Joel Edmondson or it's Gavrikov, right? Mm-hmm. Because to me, I've always said about this team, they score enough. They got to figure out how to keep it out of their net. Well, now their goaltend has come around quite a bit. And now they got a kid here named Philip Broberg who's taken a huge step, and he's starting to play really, really well. Might be able to take a few minutes away from Darnell Nurse, who probably plays a few minutes too many, right? A kid, you guys know Brett Kulak. Yep. He's just probably a number 5 on most teams. Boy, he stepped his game up, and he's been good. So they bring in a big, gnarly guy named Vincent Desharnais off the farm. All of a sudden, he's fighting Arbor Jackeye, and he looks like he can play. Yeah. So now I say, like, I'm not saying that these defensemen out there, these stay-at-home types, aren't better than the guys they have, but are they that much better? And are they worth spending a first-round pick on? Or do you take that first-round pick and go to the market and go after a forward like a Kane or a Timo Meier or someone like that and make that big splash? I'm kind of starting to change my mind on that, boys.
Yeah, so I guess, Mark, where is that direction? Because I've seen so many Oilers fans mix, and I want to tie this into also a Tyson Barrie conversation, because all the Oilers fans, I feel like, that want Erik Karlsson, want that big move, I feel like I've also been in that conversation of saying Tyson Barrie's been a great fit this year. Everyone loves him, and he's played his role well. So Lucas and I were having this conversation. It's like, if you bring a big name on the defense, especially an Erik Karlsson, Tyson Barrie's, and we saw that problem in Toronto, his role diminishes and he goes through those struggles. He doesn't have that fit and have that role anymore. So if you go for that big swing, you're also losing that asset in Tyson Barrie, but you're also probably trading some of the names you just said, either the first, but maybe Broberg or Holloway. Right. Do you think Oilers, at least from what you've seen and heard from fans, do you think the response would be pretty negative if they lost like 2 of those big assets, but it meant getting a big name?
Well, let's talk Karlsson specifically, okay? If you trade for Erik Karlsson, you might as well trade. Firstly, you have to trade Tyson Barrie back because you got to get some salary out. You might as well trade Tyson Barrie back because Erik Karlsson's a better Tyson Barrie. You don't need. I mean, I like Tyson Barrie a lot, but I'm here to tell you, you probably don't need both guys. So sure, you trade Tyson Barrie back. But the problem on a Karlsson trade is, depending on how much San Jose is willing to retain, and there's a history that says probably not much, you got to try to trade out $11 million in salary here. The Oilers played in Montreal on Sunday. They had a 22-man roster. Let's say they, just for fun, let's say they trade Barrie for Karlsson. Okay, that's 1-for-1. Then they got to add in $3 million of Jesse Puljujarvi. So that's another guy they'd lose. Then they probably got to add in another guy like Warren Foegele to make the money work. And they're still not at 11.5. So we're counting on the San Jose Sharks to eat some salary here. So before we even talk, guys, about the first-round pick and the really good prospect that San Jose wants, whether it's Broberg or Evan Bouchard or Dylan Holloway or whoever it is, now you're already down 2 players. You got a 20, you bring in Karlsson, you got a 20-man roster for the rest of the season, right? So the whole premise of bringing in Erik Karlsson is to make a 4-round run. Are you going to make a 4-round run with certainly down the stretch with 20 players? And in the playoffs, now you can bring up more guys. I understand that. But all your depth guys, you just traded away. The guys you're bringing up are minor league players. So is Karlsson that good? I'm not sure anyone's that good.
Yeah, I agree, honestly, with you, Mark. I feel like it does subtract a lot from the depth. And we've seen as rounds go in the playoffs and you get deeper and deeper into them, you need those guys on the 3rd and 4th line to chip in. You need those guys on the 3rd pair to do their work, right? So
you need a new hero every night in the playoffs. And absolutely. If you trade all your candidates, you run out of heroes awful quick, right?
Yeah. And my favorite hero, always looking back on it, is Maxime Talbot when he went on that run with Pittsburgh and he was scoring all those big goals, like a guy like that, right? And who knows, Warren Foegele could be that guy or Jesse Puljujarvi. I actually did want to ask you about, and I had it written down about Puljujarvi, because I feel like this asset in general and just this player in general has seen so many ups and downs in the Edmonton market. And I feel like we've seen him traded out of Edmonton so many times. And here we are, he's still there. Do you see in general, Jesse Puljujarvi, on the Oilers going into the playoffs this season and them hanging on to him past the deadline?
You know what? I can't see it. And the reason I can't see it is he makes $3 million and they're a money in, money out team. This is an LTIR team. And you guys know, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners know, when you're deep in LTIR, when you get a guy at the deadline that makes $6 million, you're not just taking the last part of the year, the $1.5 million. You got to clear $6 million to take that player on March 3rd. So just by finances, Jesse Puljujarvi has worked his way down to basically be in their last forward here. Devin Shore just got cleared waivers. He'll be going down to Bakersfield. The last guy in their forward lineup, gentlemen, is Jesse Puljujarvi, just because that's where he's found himself. He's played himself into that position. So when they make a trade, they will do something here. The Oilers Kenny Holland every year adds something. He's got a good team. He wants to add to it. But the casualty going the other way, at this point, unless a whole bunch of stuff changes and a bunch of injuries come and everything's different, at this point, Jesse Puljujarvi has played himself into a position where he's going to be the $3 million going the other way.
I was going to say, based on that too, Yamamoto coming in, where do you see his fit? Because I know we've seen him at times on the top line. We've seen him at times well down in the bottom 6. Where do you see Yamamoto in terms of the fit on this team?
Really good question. I mean, he's been injured all year, so it's sort of not fair to judge his production this year because he's been hurt since training camp. All in and out. He's got some neck issue. I am not sure. I'll tell you right now, I don't think Kailer Yamamoto was a top 6 player in this league. I don't think he's a top 6 right winger. And at 5'8" and 150 pounds, is he a bottom 6 winger? Maybe not on my team, right? Like, I like the player, but I don't like guys who weigh 150 pounds in my bottom 6 unless they play the game like Gallagher plays it or like Josh Archibald plays it. And I'm here to tell you, he's had a lot of time in the top 6 next to 2 of the best centers in the world, and he doesn't light it up. He scores you 2 goals a month. So I think that he's got one more year left in his contract at 3.1, and then I think there's a bit of a reckoning coming here. He either has to tear it up next year, Yamamoto and become something he hasn't been yet, or he's going to have to take a look at his career and maybe do the Andrew Cogliano and turn into that fast skating, hard checking third, fourth line guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, I also wanted to ask you just overall your sense, because we just talked about the Western Conference being wide open. What's your overall sense of, because the trade deadline, I feel like it's every year we talk about how busy it's going to be, but there's been so many big names. What's your sense on if these deals will actually happen, or what's your sense on like if we're actually going to see a busy trade deadline?
I think we'll see a busy trade deadline. I think we will. I think we'll see Meier move. We'll see Chychrun move. Finally, remember Chychrun's been hanging around here on
so long,
2 years.
Forever.
Right. So, it's obviously a hard trade to make. It's clear to me that Arizona's asking for more than market value, or he'd have moved already because he's a good player. I will see some guys move, but I think we've got probably. Here's the deal: all the good teams, the teams that would want or take a guy like a Meier or a Karlsson or a Kane or a Taves, they're all capped out. Right? Every one of them. Yep. And all the teams that can afford to take those guys, no problem. Well, they're not trading for those guys at the deadline because they're going nowhere. Right? So it's a kind of a goofy situation. The guys with no term left, they'll move. If Kane wants to go somewhere, you can make it work because Chicago will eat half that salary. Same with Taves. Same with Timo Meier. Right? It's the guys like Karlsson with 4 years left that trying to make that trade in season, boys. I don't think you can make that trade in season, to be honest.
Yeah. I once thought that contract was never going to be able to be moved at the way Karlsson was playing. And all of a sudden, the fact that this is even on the table and discussed is a credit to Erik Karlsson and how great he's played this season. Right? Like unbelievable. Mark, let's zero in on I'm trying to pick your brain and zero in on a player or a style of player when it comes to the forward. Let's say it's a forward for Edmonton, right? That they're going to add at the deadline. And the Oilers already have one of the best, if not the best, top six, I'll say, in the league. One of the best. And if they were to add one more big piece, I'm sure it would be the best. When you got McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, list goes on.
Yeah.
Let's say you have Timo Meier, an impact winger like that, Patrick Kane, an impact winger like that, mind you, later in his career now, or is it more of a guy to shore up the center depth, like a Ryan O'Reilly type piece, or a
like a Nick Paul, what Tampa did last year?
Yeah, let's say, what would you err on if you had to give your best guess? More of the impact winger, or the versatile, can slide into second and third line winger center type player?
If you told me you could put Ryan O'Reilly on this team, I would say put him on there and make everything else work.
Yeah.
Right now their third line center options are either Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who is not, in my mind, a classic third line centerman. I think he's a top 6 left winger on a really good team. That's what he is. Then you have Ryan McLeod. In my opinion, he might be there one day. He's not there 2 days. He's a good young player. I like him. He's one of those cheap young contracts you need on every good team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Oilers have a few of those, and those guys are playing okay. Holloway is a good young player. McLeod's a good young player. Broberg's cheap and young and good. Bouchard's still on his ELC. They got enough of those guys. To me, they need a guy that can win a key face-off late, a guy that can defend a 2-1 lead late. If you gave me the choice, and we're throwing away cap hits and all the requisite stuff here, of all the players that are moving at the deadline, and you can put one on the Edmonton Oilers, to me, you give me Ryan O'Reilly and I walk away with like I just robbed the bank.
Yeah, I wonder if the Blues, these two teams we're talking about, the Blues and Sharks, because I look at the Blues and I'm like, Ryan O'Reilly, Barbashev, kind of what you talked about, Lucas. It's like those two guys I could see as fits for the Oilers. And I also look at the Sharks, like even if they're talking about guys like Meier and Karlsson, I wonder if like the Sharks have quite a few depth guys. Like even a guy, I'm not saying this is necessarily for the Oilers, but a guy like Nick Bonino, he had the crazy playoff pedigree there. So I wonder if there's guys like that slip under the radar, but maybe a third or fourth round pick. And I wonder if that becomes like a Puljujarvi type deal, because then the cap just matches. And then you're also adding a guy that fits what you're looking for in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think this is what I think for sure. Again, they're a dollar in, dollar out team. I think that no matter whether or not Holland could hit any version of a double or a triple or a home run up near the top of his lineup, with a one of these really good players we're talking about, he will find some help. He'll find a Sam Lafferty out of Chicago, He'll find one of those depth guys. Last year he brought in Derek Brassard. Didn't have the impact he hoped, but that's what he was shooting for. So I do for sure think he will bring in one of those guys, maybe even a depth defenseman. They brought in a guy last year, Ryan Murray, to sort of be their number 7. Yep. He's hurt. I'm not sure he's going to play again all year. If they could find maybe Luke Shen shooting a little high here, but a guy that does what Luke Shen can do. You got $3 million going out in Puljujarvi that might be able to facilitate that if you can find cheaper guys. So he won't do nothing. I think it's just the degree of the something he does that we're all questioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark, back to the start here, because I know we threw out a couple of names like Edmondson and Gavrikov. Do you think there's a possibility that the Oilers throw out a first for a defenseman that's not named Erik Karlsson? Because I think that was the concern for some Oilers fans, where you're going to see your news timeline and all of a sudden the Oilers are giving up a first for Edmondson.
I agree. And I don't know that you'll get a first at this point. First of all, let's talk about the player Edmondson. He's been out for a while. His back's out again, right? He missed the Edmonton game there on Sunday. I think he's been out for at least 3 games. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the issue with Edmondson. I love Joel Edmondson. He's a big, strong, shutdown, heavy, cycle-busting, tough, experienced leader type guy. Play for my team every day. But am I giving up a first-round pick for a guy that could play 3 playoff games and his back is punched? And then I got him next year too?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. Gavrikov, I think that, there's 2 sides to playing in Columbus, boys. One side is a lot of people don't watch you play, so no one really knows if you're good or bad. The other side is when your name comes out as early as his did and everybody starts looking at you every day, we start to realize, man, he doesn't make a lot of passes tape to tape. A lot of them go off the glass first. Here in Edmonton, I'm not going to tell you this isn't a team. Ken Holland's a veteran guy. He knows how to run a team. He knows how to deal with star players. But when you're making this move, they consult Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl because those guys are the men here. They're the guys. It's your captain and McDavid, best player in the world. Those guys want a player closer to Karlsson's skill set. They want a puck on the tape. They don't want to fish it out of the corner. So that's the line they walk in Edmonton. They got a ton of skill, and those skill guys want more skill. But we all learned, Mark Messier didn't GM the Vancouver Canucks very well. You can't let the players GM your team. So this is the push and the pull here in Edmonton. Ken Holland wants to bring in the right player, but he also wants to bring in players that his best players want to play with. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask you, because that's kind of in the conversation around is that's what the big players want. They want the guy that's going to get them the puck versus just and that's why the Tyson Barrie love is there. And I was also going to ask you, is that why a Gosh to Spare potential fit could work for the Oilers?
Yeah, because there's a skill guy who's not making a ton and who wouldn't cost you a ton, right? He's not in the Karlsson.
Especially coming off an injury. By the time he comes back, he'll be in around that deadline.
Right. I mean, that's it. And you're hoping he's going to help you a bit. And he is a skill guy. Now, I don't know. And if I'm going to play Ken Holland now, I got to put Gostisbehere on the ice in 5-on-5 in a big, heavy series against Winnipeg or Dallas. Is that what I want to do? How much ice? Now, this is the team that plays 11-7. Remember, guys, the Oilers they've been very successful since Christmas. In almost every game, they've played 7 defensemen. So you can hide him a bit. But Gostisbehere, if you don't like Barrie in his own end, and I don't mind him, boy, oh boy, Gostisbehere, I don't think he's as good a defensive player as Barrie is. Do you?
Yeah, it's going to be a very similar thing. And I think that's why it's always Lucas, I feel like we see this with Leafland all the time. It's like the grass is not always greener. So fans are always plucking players from other teams, not realizing it's going to be the exact same situation.
Grass is not always. Sometimes you get a guy that didn't work somewhere else. Like Barry's a great example.
Yeah,
Barrie didn't work in Toronto.
Cody Cece's another example.
Yeah, Cece didn't work in Toronto. And they get this rap because it didn't work in Toronto that they're bad players. They're not bad players. They just weren't great players in Toronto. And you got to delineate between that, right? It's sort of the old Larry Murphy rule, isn't it?
Yep. That's the famous one. Hyman worked in Toronto, just not this well. I could have never foresaw this coming. I mean, wow, unbelievable the way he's playing in Edmonton this year.
Yeah, I think here's a guy that didn't play till he was older, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't join the league till he was like 23, right?
Yep, 23, 24.
Yeah. So now, you know what? He's kind of like he's coming into his prime a couple years later because he started a little later. He's a better player even than he was in Toronto. And don't count me as one of those guys that says Toronto didn't know what they had or Toronto fans didn't know. I know everyone in Toronto loved this guy. They did, and for good reason. I criticize Kyle Dubas for not saying, this is the exact guy my team needs. This is what my team is missing. I know they ran out of cap space for this guy. To me, that was poor management. They should have saved cap space for that exact player because that's the kind of guy, when I look at Toronto's roster, that's what they're missing, right?
Now, yep.
Him and Marchment would be another guy, right? Mm-hmm. You got to recognize we don't have enough Hyman. We don't have enough Marchment. And if I got to clear cap space and get rid of some soft skill, that's what I got to do. I think in the end, we'll criticize Dubas for that. But Hyman is an unbelievable good player. He's become a huge leader inside the Oilers dressing room. He is a major part of what's going on in Edmonton for sure.
Yeah, I did want to add to that point. Yeah, it's all about fit too and just going to the playoffs. And I'm sure the Leafs would love Bunting on one line and Hyman on one line. Hey, Lucas?
Right.
That would be unbelievable, wouldn't it? Mark, I had one more for you too. I wanted to just quickly circle back to the goaltending and Jack Campbell, obviously at the start of the season, it wasn't what, a lot of Oilers fans had hoped for and had seen in him late in the season last year for Toronto, right? And into the playoffs. He played pretty well against Tampa. He's starting to find his game now and get rolling, and he's been known as that goalie that's hot and cold. How do the Oilers fans and just how is the market feeling about the goaltending for Edmonton getting, going down the stretch and into the playoffs now, and obviously with Stuart Skinner as part of that conversation?
Well, thankfully, this wasn't a situation where it was Campbell and nobody. I mean, I guess it was. Yeah. Who outside Edmonton heard of Stuart Skinner before the season? So the good news is the nobody turned into somebody. If this was Campbell and a guy that couldn't play very well, it would be total panic here.
Oh, yeah.
Stu Skinner has bought Campbell time to find himself. And you sort of feel like, again, if Campbell's going to be a hot and cold guy, maybe when he goes cold, you got someone who can play a little bit. So Stu Skinner's rescued the whole thing. But look, I want to say this. You had Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen, and finally the Koskinen contract expires, and he's gone. He's in Europe. So Ken Holland it wasn't like Ken Holland had 5 years to shop for the best goalie. He had to get a goalie last summer, right? Had to get a goalie last summer. So you go in the free agent market, goalies make $5 million in the free agent market. That's just the deal. You don't go get a fabulous UFA goalie for 2.5. You get them for 5, you get them for 6. Kemper already didn't want to play in Edmonton once before, so you're not getting Kemper. Then you got Campbell. I'm trying to think of the third guy last year. Now I can't remember him.
Well, a couple of years ago, it was Markstrom they were looking at, but I'm trying to think of last
they tried for Markstrom. They couldn't get Markstrom. He chose to go to Calgary. But last summer, there was 3 guys in the market, and they all signed for 5. Oh, Husso.
Husso, that's right. Billy Husso. Yep.
Husso goes to Detroit at, I think, 4.5. So my point is this. People criticize Holland for getting Campbell. He had to come out of that July with a goalie. Not getting Kemper, didn't get Husso, picked Campbell. They all cost around $5 million. And is Campbell the perfect goalie? No, he's not the perfect goalie. But since Christmas, he's been awfully good. Let's see if he can mature to the point where he can hang on to these Jags of his for more than about a month. I guess we're going to find that out down the stretch here.
Do you have a current gut feeling on if it's Campbell or Skinner game 1? If they're there?
Well, if both are playing at the top of their game, it's probably Campbell because he's a more experienced goalie.
Yeah. I
think, guys, they just signed Skinner to a 3-year deal, starts next year. They're going to have 2 goalies for, I think, basically 7.75 signed up long-term. That's pretty good in your goaltending.
That's good.
For sure.
If you're going to get saves out of 2 guys, you got 7.75. I don't mind that. That's not bad management. So I still think they wouldn't be a tall unhappy to see Campbell take the reins here. He's taken them now. Question becomes with Jack Campbell is how long does he hang on to him?
Yeah, I think the goaltending conversation, as you said, I think there's less stress there because of Skinner, and obviously he's had a great year. But yeah, I think Campbell, as you said, the experience, and obviously after a couple of playoff short runs with Toronto, I think he's ready to go for an actual run with this team. So yeah, Mark, overall, just what you have coming up, whether it's personally or Sportsnet, what can people expect from you with your writing and anything you got going on?
Well, I'm following the Oilers day by day by day. I got a piece on their chances of landing Erik Karlsson that should be dropping sometime on the afternoon here. I think on Tuesday they'll be putting Jesse Puljujarvi on waivers, which will definitely deserve a column. Then I start traveling with them all the way down the road, boys. So I'll be coming through Toronto. I'll expect a cold beer from the two brothers here.
Yeah.
When I get to Toronto, no question about that.
Let's go. Let's do it.
And other than that, boys, hockey all the way down the stretch. I can't wait for it.
Mark, you just dropped a bombshell there at the end too at the Puljujarvi tomorrow. I mean, that can't go unnoticed there.
Yeah, it looks Kyler Yamamoto comes back for
Wednesday,
a Wednesday
right?
night game against Detroit. They got to clear basically $3.1 million in salary to get him on. They waived and demoted Devin Shore on Monday, and they still need to make another move. And I'll tell you what, they could send down Broberg, they could send down Desharnais, they could send down Holloway. None of those guys are waiver eligible. All those guys are playing better than Jesse Puljujarvi. I sense it's going to be him that goes down. Yeah,
and as we've talked about cap in, cap out, like I wonder if he just goes right through, Mark, if they don't trade him, like, because of the cap hit. I mean, maybe a rebuilding team gives him a shot, but we've seen, like, how many guys have we seen go through waivers that were attractive on the outside, whether it's Vrana or even, I mean, if someone wanted to take a shot at Nedeljkovic when he went through, there's so many names. I mean, once upon a time, Luke Shen was a guy that went through waivers and no one claimed him. And now look at the assets. So I wonder, the Puljujarvi one's interesting, but Mark, man, thank you. That beer I'll have to shoot you a text when you're around Toronto, and we'll get you a couple of beers because we really appreciate your time.
All right, boys, you know where to find me. Thanks for having me. I for sure appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much,
Thanks
Mark.
a lot,
we'll
Mark.
chat soon. What a chat with Mark Spector. Man, that was
unbelievable.
A great guest. That was a great guest. Gave us a lot. Good chat about the Oilers. And I think for any Oilers fan or